Welcome back, everybody.
Best countdown ever.
It's Comic Art Live, the spring edition. I hope you've all been having a great weekend with all these great panels and incredible art that the vendors are selling. But I'm John Suntress. I'm from the Word Balloon podcast, and happy to talk to one of my buddies in comics. It's been great to get to know him over the years. Mike Gold, everybody, the fantastic editor of DC and First Comics back in the day. And, Mike, shame on me. What is your current platform?
My current platform, I'm writing and about to be podcasting for popculturesquad.com, which is a lot of fun working with Bob Harrison over there, who's just one of the nicest guys in the comics business. We'll end that, but right now he's still one of the nicest guys. And every once in a while I kind of noodle around with a little project or two. We've got one kind of in the works now. Doing a lot of conventions, just to get out there and to prove that I can still walk a little bit. Did CradleCon last weekend, which was at the Cradle of Aviation Museum on Long Island. One of the coolest venues for a comic book show I've ever been to in the 54 years I've been going to conventions.
How do they claim being the cradle of aviation? You would think Kitty Hawk, North Carolina would be the cradle, but what justifies their museum with that title?
There are some folks in Bridgeport who believe the same thing and have a good argument, not a great argument, but I think it's the cradle because that's where a really evil, ugly, horrible Nazi collaborator who had 3 different marriages going consistently, one in the United States where his baby got kidnapped, and 2 in Germany, all at the same time. That's where he took off to fly across the Atlantic nonstop. Okay.
Wow.
So, not that I have any opinions about the guy.
I'm sure.
And, there's a lot of aircraft industries that are grumbling for crying out loud. So, as a Black Hawk fan and former Black Hawk editor, that part was really kind of cool. Actually, the whole thing was really kind of cool. So,
do they have it? Do they have a Black Hawk exhibit at the museum?
No.
Okay.
Although I should offer.
Yeah, no, you should. That'd be a great thing to curate and show the art and everything. No, you're so right about that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great. When Rick Burchett did the Black Hawk series for me for Action and then the spinoff, before he started drawing it, he took classes, he took lessons, he took flying lessons on one of those planes in order to get the feel for it so he could draw it right. And thereby enduring respect and resulted from that. That's a dedication, dedication. So that was fun.
That's amazing. And did Marty Pasco, did he write that strip?
That was Marty wrote, yeah.
That was a great follow to Howard's Prestige series. Did you edit the Howard series?
Oh yeah. Actually, that Prestige series, I have to reread it. I should do that about every 10 years. Because at the time I was doing it, or at the time it was published, I thought I was too close to it. Howard and I would talk, virtually every day for months. We had new ideas and we would work it in and stuff. And after a while, the problem with editing something you really enjoy, working with a guy that you've really enjoyed working with all these years, who's also a good personal friend, you get a little too close to it. And I thought I was too close to that one. But I reread it like 10 years afterwards, and I thought, wow, this does work. This does communicate. It's heady stuff. It's not just babes and airplanes, which is kind of odd. You'd think with Howard it would just be babes and airplanes, but and stockings, great
yes.
stocking.
Yes.
Third stockings. I think DC passed up a merchandising deal offer on that one. It was terrific.
Excellent, man. That's fantastic. Look, just like Betty Grable with your Blackhawks silk stockings. Fantastic.
That's right. That's right.
That's
That's
outstanding.
right. Yeah, that would have been cool. But
You know,
I liked Howard series. I thought it was great. And I like a lot of those sort of reboots. Whoa! I just disappeared. A lot of those. Okay, a lot of those reboots. The older fans, and I'm a much older fan, thinks like, "Well, why'd you bother with that? It was good the way it was." And often there's some truth to it. I mean, that doesn't mean the new stuff can't be good too, but I get that. Blackhawk was sort of meandering around for thousands of years. DC, when they bought the rights from Quality Comics, when they went out of business, DC did not know how to treat it and really made it stupid almost immediately. And then maybe 15 years later, Dick Giordano and a few others tried to rescue it, Pat Boyette, and they did a nice job, a pretty good job, but it was really too confusing. And we, I think, put it in some nice order. Of course, we didn't have Lady Blackhawk, and by the time we could have, I think she was being used in Birds of Prey or Suicide Squad or one of those. I think Gail was doing a great job with her. But Lord knows I didn't want to mess with that. She was great. And, every once in a while, Brian Boland would knock out a beautiful Lady Blackhawk drawing. So maybe it was good she wasn't in that series.
I also liked the recent DC Bombshells comics that they were making. That kind of had that Rosie the Riveter feel to the female heroes.
Very much so. Very much so. They're Hawkwoman in particular. I like most of them. I like the series. I love those little books that the digital first books that never went digital second, and usually a merchandising time sucks until about 40 years later when you go back and reread Hot Wheels and you go, hey, this stuff was pretty good.
Sure.
Which is true. I mean, how could all that Alex Toth not be good? But
you're right. And of course, another guy that's at Pop Culture Hound, our buddy Ed Cato, is about to release the new collection of the great Captain Action run, and we're going to get a lot of great Gil Kane, and I forget some of the other artists that did Captain Action back in the day.
Yeah, well, Wally Wood was there too.
There you go.
You can't go wrong with either of those two guys. No, it was a very nice series. There are some exceptions to my rule of tie-ins suck, because obviously not all do. But it does tend to suck more when you remake established property as a tie-in. And that is something that DC in particular, Marvel to a slightly lesser extent, they're both really guilty of that horribly. It's like, well, Superman got married in this TV show that we're about to cancel, so let's bury him in the comic book. No. No, that didn't work. That didn't help anybody for a long time.
That's interesting, and I hear where you're coming from. It is interesting, though, and I know as a comic historian that you are, reading, I guess it was Mark Waid that discovered that Jerry Siegel really wanted Superman to reveal his identity to Lois back, in the late 40s or early 50s, and have them be more partners. Yeah, expand on that if you would.
I think it was the mid 40s. I might even have a copy of that script around here somewhere.
Wow.
Maybe. It was rejected by DC. I can't remember right now whether it was for the comics or for the newspaper strip.
Okay.
Might have been for the newspaper strip, which is where Siegel made his real money. Back before the lawsuit, of course.
Sure.
And when they treated him like shit.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, yeah, God knows. I'll tell you something. The hardest and most disappointing thing I ever had to do in the comics business was when I was at First Comics and Jerry Siegel called me up looking for work.
Wow.
And Jerry's stuff wasn't going to work pretty much anywhere at that point in time. Even if you're doing a very nostalgia-oriented, it would be nostalgia for my parents, and I'm 1,000 years old, so you can just imagine. That was really hard, and essentially what I did, and I said more eloquently than this because Jerry deserved it. I said, thank you for creating my job. No, we can't work with you.
Wow. Yeah.
God, that sucked.
That
was
sure
just a terrible, terrible afternoon. But, ultimately, his family won the good fight. Got a lot of help from a lot of people. Some are not quite so visible in that. And it worked. It worked pretty good.
Agreed. Mentioning that, we just lost Neil Adams, who obviously was a big advocate for Siegel and Schuster to
Absolutely.
get compensation. And yeah, I don't know if you had any good Neil memories. I know, for example, and we've talked about this before on the Word Balloon podcast, you were with DC Publicity when Superman versus Muhammad Ali was coming out. So I don't know if you have any great stories tied to that or other Neil Adams stories you want to share.
Well, Neil wasn't happy with some of the promotion I did on when we released the book because I didn't invite him to speak at the Owl press conference. Now, the reason for that was very simple. Nobody was going to pay attention to him. Nobody paid attention to Jeanette Kahn, who looks more appealing to the sports cameraman than Neil does. Possibly not as much as Muhammad Ali did, but still, the cameras weren't on when she did her introductory speech, and we had trillions of reporters out there. There was more lights in there than MGM had stars in the sky, and Neil was pissed at me. Now, we were doing a stunt there that I'd arranged through his lawyer, not Neil's lawyer, but through Muhammad Ali's lawyer, who I knew because he had the office next to my lawyer when I was working in Chicago. Good friend of the lawyer, just a great, great guy. And that's where I first met Ali. And the old, late newspaper columnist, TV host, and Chicago Bears play-by-play man, or color man, Irv Kupson. He and the lawyer and I worked out this stunt where Ali was not going to talk about the fight that was coming up. He was only going to talk about the comic book. And we were on the front page of every newspaper on Earth. And maybe other planets. I don't know. It's Krypton. And the headline was, Ali won't talk about the fight. And we were, the second paragraph, and we were the art. The art that accompanied the story in virtually every newspaper known to humanity. It was a promotion stunt like you wouldn't believe. And the book sold extremely well for about 3 weeks until Ali lost the fight that he wouldn't talk about.
To Leon Spinks.
Yeah. And Neil was pissed at me for that. And I get it. I understand why, but it was hopeless.
Sure.
It was hopeless. Aside from that, I've had great times with Neil, and you can't argue that he's kind of an opinionated guy, and I'm a kind of opinionated guy, so we got into it from time to time, including all night in the Hamptons on Long Island. We'd come back from dinner, and our respective friends went to bed, and Neil and I talked from about 2 in the morning until 6 or 7 in the morning. Just straight through, taking time only to go to the bathroom because both of us had the runs from dinner. A strange time. Neil was great. We used to see each other the day before the Pittsburgh Con not Pittsburgh, I'm sorry, Baltimore,
Okay, sure.
every year, and except for during the plague.
Yeah.
And then last year, it was during setup, and we would spend about 20, 30 minutes just talking about God knows what, generally whatever Neil wanted to talk about, which was fine by me. It's always interesting. But he didn't show up this past year, and my uh-oh sense went off real loud. It's a shame. There are many masters, true, genuine masters of this medium from the first two generations, and he was one of the last of the second generation to come in. And we're losing them left and right. Now we're making new ones. I don't want to say that the world is horrible because of this, but it's not as good a place without them.
Agreed.
And George Perez and Neil Adams both dying within days of each other. Even though in George's case, we knew it was coming. That never makes it easier.
No.
But it makes it a bit more historical in the sense that we get to commemorate his works while he's still there to see that. And that's always sweet. George was a wonderful, wonderful guy as well. One of the absolute nicest people in the history of Earth, just period. He and I were talking about a project before he got into the position where he couldn't do it, which was a long time ago, of doing a complete, faithful adaptation of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar.
Wow.
And he wanted to use Shakespeare's dialogue, which I thought was great, but going to be a hell of a challenge. We never were able to take on that challenge to see if it could be done. And of course, in my brain, it's all the artwork. I mean, can you just imagine what George Perez's Julius Caesar would have looked like? My God. So that's on my list. It's a long list of wonderful projects that never happened, and now never will. But hey, we can think about what could have happened.
Well, and thankfully, in both cases, there's so many great of their works that are still in print and are accessible. I'm so glad Neil put his Dr. Kildare comic strips on his website, and I don't know if Maryland is going to keep them up there. Or Ben Casey, excuse me.
Ben Casey.
Of course, Ben Casey. Shame on me.
That might be my favorite of all of his work. Which is a little weird, but you absolutely have to really look at it and study it. His Sundays are beautiful. And that is to take nothing away from any of his other work. Arguably, my second favorite was his run on the Spectre, which lasted only a few issues. But that Wildcat story was just terrific.
I see the cover in my head right now. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm hit. When DC gets around to doing Neil Adams' greatest non-Batman stories, they should give me a call.
No kidding. Good Lord. Or that Superman Terra-Man story that he did in the early 70s. I really loved that one too.
Yeah. That was a rough time for Superman, because it was clear they didn't know what to do with the character, but they finally realized they had to do something.
Yes.
And I mean that's the start. at least they had to do something. Jeanette, as publisher, she came in 1976.
Yes.
Wasn't a big fan of Kurt Swan's work. Not that she didn't like Kurt's work, but that she felt it was very dated. There might be some truth to that. I can argue that point. I mean, my Superman was Wayne Boring, so although I love Kurt's stuff and I love Kurt personally, he was a neighbor. So that was cool. She tried to talk Garcia Lopez into drawing Superman, and he did do some. He did a phenomenal job, but he didn't like doing superheroes, had no affinity for Superman, felt he had no affinity for Superman. You could never tell from his work. And, Kurt wound up getting back the gig for another 8 years or so before they said, okay, we really have to modernize this. Let's bring in John Byrne and Jerry Ordway and Marv Wolfman. And they did a nice job. In some ways, they did, of all of the people in the last 50 years, the three of them did a phenomenal job in my book.
Sure.
Superman has to live and grow the way that James Bond lives and grows, the way that the Doctor Who series lives and grows, even Sherlock Holmes. If I can go a little Doctor Strange on you. And Superman too. Every generation has a right to a Superman that they can relate to. They don't have to relate to Batman. That's not the point. But Superman should be relatable.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Matt Wagner and I talked about this years ago, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. He felt, and it's reflective in his work, he really felt that a lot of these heroes work best if you keep them in the era in which they were created. And his examples are Zorro. He's like, you can put Zorro on a motorcycle, but I don't know, it doesn't work. You need him on the horse. It needs to be the 1800s. And he even said that about Batman. And that's why a lot of his Batman stuff was so retro. When he took those, short detective stories like Batman and the Monster Man that was only like 8 pages, and he made it into a miniseries, but it was still kind of set in that 30s aesthetic and everything. But yeah, I don't know what your thought. I mean, again, as you said, to modernize the various heroes, but
Matt has a phenomenal feel for doing that, for getting that pulp feeling right. The Lone Ranger. I mean, any character that you can go back to its pulp roots. In the case of Lone Ranger, the pulp thing was sort of an afterthought. It started out on the radio, and that's where it thrived. But I get his point. I agree with his point in terms of every time he puts a typewriter and pen to page, he proves his point. I'm not sure that that's absolutely necessary, but those characters that are genuine pulp characters that preceded comics, like the Shadow, certainly the Shadow, and Zorro, and maybe the Phantom.
Sure.
Again, that wasn't a pulp character, but it was very much out of the pulp characters and it preceded Superman. Maybe he has a point there. I don't care. I will read anything he produces. Unfortunately, that's just one. But I spent the last weekend at the show with John K. Snyder.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and they did some magnificent work together, and were just one of those perfect teams in comics. Anything that Matt does, I'm there, and if he says this is what I think works, he proves it. So I'm fine.
Malcolm Bourne wants to say hello to you.
Hi, Malcolm.
There you go. And also he says hello to me. Thank you very much, man. I will check Twitter later. But everybody's enjoying the conversation that we're having right now, Mike. And I'm glad you're back doing conventions. What other conventions are you going to be doing this summer?
I may not be doing many this summer. I have to cat sit for my cats.
I see the
cat. Oh yeah, is he there?
While you were talking earlier, the cat's tail popped in. It's like, all right, excellent. I love when that happens.
That's Roscoe. He turns 15 like any minute.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. But my daughter Adrian is going to New Orleans for a month, and then comes back, and then goes to San Diego for a week, which is fine as long as I'm the one who's driving her to the airport. But aside from that, so I have to stick around the house and take care of our 2 cats, and I'm fine with that because I hate heat. But I have no real plans on doing any shows until Baltimore, which haven't even committed to yet.
Okay.
But I'm up for it. I had to cancel, as you know, a trip to Chicago for this weekend. But I'm hoping to prove that I'm a complete idiot under the belief that it won't be hotter than hell in Chicago in August.
Yeah, I hear you,
Yeah.
man. I mean, right? It's so funny. Right now, it's 63 degrees. We had some really nice weather a couple weeks ago, and I'm not complaining about 63. Don't get me wrong.
I
But
love six. Favorite
yeah,
time.
we're all of us were talking, and we're all like, oh man, if it's this cold now, that means summer's gonna be really hot. So yeah, we'll see.
Moody's Pub is still open, isn't it?
Which one?
Moody's Pub.
Yes.
Last time I was in, that you and I had dinner. We had dinner at Moody's.
That was awesome. Absolutely, man.
I've been going there since they opened in the very early 70s. And, of course, they're not air conditioned. They have that big fireplace.
No, I'm gonna confirm after we're done talking that it's still open because I haven't been there, but I believe it is. And no, man, that's Mike. This is why I love hanging with you because truly, the classic joints, and that's like I take people when C2E2 happens, Miller's Pub on Wabash.
Yes,
I take
go
them
there all the time. Yeah.
And for a while they took down. It's for people listening who don't know. Just like great LA or New York places, they have all these great celebrity photos that they had on the walls. And for a brief moment, like about a year or so pre-pandemic, they took them all down. And every time I'd come in, I'm like, guys, you're like the only place that has like Tony Bennett pictures from the 60s or Jerry Lewis, Marilyn Monroe, and Humphrey Bogart eating at Ed Miller's. Durante, all these like classic people, and thankfully they put a lot of them back up, so it's regained its aesthetic, and that's the thing. We know the joints, and I mean, hell, man, you know more of the joints than I do, and that's fantastic. The joints are the fun joints.
I'm older than you. Some of those places. About 3 weeks ago, I was having dinner in Manhattan at Gallagher's Steakhouse, which is
love it. Been there.
Really a classic. Yeah, you're a boxing fan. You must have lived there.
Bert Sugar took me to Gallagher's, so every time I was in New York, we'd eat at Gallagher's. Absolutely.
Truly a classic steakhouse. And we were having just this wonderful time. But there's this portrait of Ed Sullivan staring me right in the face during the entire dinner, which was a spectacular dinner. Never been a meal that. Yeah, I love that stuff. I love those really old, beautiful restaurants that are unburdened by vegans. So, a good time.
No, that's the best, man. Absolutely. So we mentioned Howard Chaykin earlier in Blackhawks.
We did.
But also all those great, your group of first comic creators that when you went back to DC in the 80s, you just, everybody. How did that all work out in terms of everybody coming with you and doing the great stuff? Tim Truman doing Hawk World and Mike Grell doing Green Arrow and John Ostrander and Suicide Squad and all these amazing projects that you were the editor for.
Because of history, and I'm going to tell you a story that seeps in comics history. In the 1960s, Irwin Donenfeld, who was running DC Comics at the time, decided, unbeknownst to anybody, that he was going to sell the company. So he got some offers from Steve Ross. They used to have a lot of mutual friends, like we say in Chicago, and there were a lot of very left-wing kind of people working at DC at the time. I could go into a list, but that's not important. He wanted to get rid of those guys. Now, most of them have been with the company forever, and perhaps they should have moved on anyway. They had no idea what the comics business was like in the mid-'60s. But then again, DC held on to that point of view for at least another 10 years and arguably another 15. So he decided there was this great stuff happening over at Charlton, which was another well-connected comic book publishing company. This one was actually created in prison. The guy who started Charlton got the idea from his cellmate. Okay, that's another story. So, Dick worked there with guys like Jim Aparo and Steve Ditko and Frank McLaughlin and Denny O'Neil, and I can go on and on. I'd be happy to. So Irwin decided to see if he could bring Dick over, but he didn't want anybody to know. So Irwin also had this little sports selling business. I mean, he boats and stuff, all marine gear.
Okay.
In Westport, Connecticut, about a mile and a half right down the road I'm looking at when I'm not looking at you right now. And there's a bar there. There still is. The bar's still there. Where I think it was Wednesday, all of the cartoonists would get together for breakfast, and they'd give their artwork to a messenger, and the messenger would take the train, which was right there, into the city and distribute all the artwork to all the publishers and syndicates and ad agencies and what have you. Irwin took Dick there to that place because he knew that Dick knew where it was. Not like he couldn't find it in Westport, but still. And Dick finally, after talking about it, he didn't catch on to we want you to get rid of all of these liberals. He didn't catch on to that because it wasn't enunciated in that form. But he did catch on to the part about, we want you to bring everybody you work with over from Charlton. So now we flash forward to 1985. And I'm sitting at the same bar, at the same restaurant, with Dick Giordano. And he's heard that I was less than thrilled with First Comics at that time, which is true. The publisher, who once again became a friend of mine, he and I had very different views on priorities for payment. I felt that if you don't pay the freelancers fairly and on time, or at least within a reasonable amount of time, because we are cockroach capitalist publishers, you won't have anything good to print, and therefore you won't have anything good to sell. He felt that the engravers and the printers really needed to be paid first because they wouldn't do it otherwise. Yes, they would, actually. This was a time when all of the distributors were going out of business and Diamond became a monopoly. So payments from some of those distributors were very slow. Some of them never happened. And the independent comics, the so-called independent comics in general, were having a hard time. My board of directors, well, let me just say I was on the two end of a lot of 3-2 votes. And when the business manager, who was the other one of those two, when he left the company, it became 3-1 votes. And I was feeling mighty lonely. So Dick heard about this and suggested I fly out to Connecticut, where I live now, and have this dinner at this, or lunching at this really classic place. And we're talking, and after a while I begin to realize, I said, so what you're doing is what Irwin did with you 20 years ago. And Dick said, yeah, same plot, same spot, same table. And Dick promised me almost as much, not quite as much, but almost as much editorial freedom as I had at first, which I thought was ridiculous.
Yeah.
How can you say that? He said, well, because if you're using established properties, I'm the only one who has to approve it. If it's something brand new, then we got to get Jeanette and Paul and Levitt's their crack marketing manager who really couldn't sell crack. Um, but that might be a little bit more difficult. But overall, no, it's not. It's not going to be a big problem for you. He said. But I'll tell you the reason why you should work for DC again. He said because we pay people on time. Not so much anymore. They've owed me $250 for several years now.
Wow.
But at the time, they were paying promptly. And so promptly that you can get a little card from DC and take it to their bank, manufacturers Hanover, and get your check cashed immediately, unless you're black. That's a different story. I once had to go to the bank with an artist. I'm not sure how he'd feel. I'm not sure how Dennis Carlin would feel if I mentioned his name. Because they dumped all over him, and I went there. Daddy went there because I was pissed. And I think the phrase in your neighborhood is "cut him a new asshole," and we walked out with his cash.
Wow.
Oh, I'm good at that.
No, I realize that, but yeah, man, these are wow.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's still Earth. In those days, I had to work twice as hard to get a black artist or a brown artist or a woman artist or writer a fair page rate, an equitable page rate.
Sure.
And it wasn't because the folks who made those decisions had a problem. The problem they had was the same problem that we all have, which is that we were raised in the United States of America, and we just don't look at it the way we should. We're beginning to, although that's coming to a crash halt right now. But, at least for a while, we've been looking at that again. Maybe things won't deteriorate as badly as it looks.
Well, I certainly know a lot of modern creators that agree with you, and also, I mean, God, DC right now is in flux. Discovery took over, but Discovery doesn't know what they want to do with DC at this moment. The one thing, what's that?
Nor did AT&T before them.
Well, that goes without saying, yes.
And quite frankly, Warner Brothers, which went through its changes, AOL and all this other stuff.
Yes.
It was musical chairs there, but, forever, but to the sound of a funeral dirge. And I'm not sure how many people who are involved in DC, and I'm not talking editorial, which doesn't really exist in DC anymore. I'm not sure how many people at DC do. It's not a normal business. If you look at it as just a licensing business, including the movies, which aren't licensed because you own the movie makers, you can understand that's where all the money is, and that's the business you're in, sort of. But if you don't realize that you are not in the merchandising business, you're not in the movie business, you are in the storytelling business, and you don't know how that works, or how to tell stories, or how to get people to tell stories that people respond to, then you don't get the movies, and you don't get the Underoos, and you don't get all the other stuff.
Sure.
And that has been so obvious over at DC's owners du jour for so long that I think it's remarkable they just haven't licensed out the properties to somebody.
Marty Pasco was saying this to me 12 years ago, that it wouldn't surprise him if DC made that move. But I will say this: I was talking to Kelly Jones yesterday, and when we were done with our panel that we did this weekend. The one thing I'll say about Discovery taking over, they're in the do-it-yourself business, and so much of the do-it-yourself business relies on publishing as much as it does the TV shows that they generate and that stuff. So while it's not storytelling per se, I think they might recognize that that's an important part of the equation
They
to
will.
forward.
They will if the people who are running DC, not Warner's or Warner Media or whatever they're calling it this week, if the folks at DC help them understand that. And it probably can be done. And I think Discovery could be a good fit. I agree with Kelly. It could be a very good fit. The first comments that they made once they had the time to start looking at the property, which they got a lot of property to look at. I think they still own the soccer team. I don't know. They, it's going to. They talked about how badly Superman has been treated. They were mostly talking about the movies, and I completely concur. But he hasn't been treated that well by the comics either, because he's always been flipping back and forth. Now with the copyright laws, with the copyrights about to expire on the original material, they have to focus on material, much of which they made up on their own, won't fall into public domain. Clark Kent will fall into public domain. John Kent will not for.
Interesting. Sure.
So
wow, I didn't think of it that way. That's very interesting.
Yes, and for the same reason, we're going to see like another 150 Robins, and there's so many Robins that they'll just have Robin conventions, and so this hits Marvel as well, but not quite as long, except for Captain America, the Human Torch, and Submariner.
Okay, yeah, Jim Hammond, Human Torch, and the Submariner, yeah.
You're right, but if you use Johnny Storm as the Human Torch, then you got to watch your ass. If you want to do Jim Hammond as the Human Torch, cool, as long as you only use those elements that were introduced in the material that's in public domain. So that upheaval is totally screwing up everything over at Marvel and DC. Eric Larson and I got into a conversation. It's just screwed up Conan because the original Robert E. Howard stories, some of them are now in public domain. And Marvel dropped the license or lost the license, depending on who you believe. But we'll continue doing Savage Adventures the same way Ablaze is doing the Samaritan, because that you can do Conan, you just can't use the trademark.
Right.
So Savage Avengers, which is a much better book than I thought it was going to be. I actually find it very entertaining. We'll continue with Conan in it, and they'll continue doing the reprints because they have some sort of contractual provision. So I asked Eric when he's going to have Conan meet up with Captain Tootsie.
Captain Tootsie from Tootsie Roll, absolutely.
Well, Captain Tootsie's public domain.
I was going to say C.C. Beck, right? The Captain Marvel artist drew Captain Tootsie.
And then Pete Costanza, who was also a Captain Marvel artist when C.C. couldn't do it all, when Clarence couldn't handle it all.
Okay.
But still, I thought that would be perfect for the Savage Dragon. Just great page 2-3 spread with Conan and Captain Tootsie just beating the shit out of each other. But I don't think Eric is interested. I don't want to say I was just kidding. I wasn't, because you could do that in Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon is a great, fun book. You might not want to let your great grandmother read it, but it's great fun.
Well, and he put the Golden Age Daredevil in Savage Dragon. So I don't blame you for suggesting Captain Tootsie. Why not? No, not at all. I have a Captain Tootsie shirt. I actually wore it at one of the two conventions I just did. I have a Captain Tootsie t-shirt. So. Honestly, everybody, if you're a Captain Marvel fan, look up Captain Tootsie, and you'll be very happy to see the art. It's great, and also, honestly, I love all these public domain characters, and I've been talking to Alex Segura and Jamal Igle because they worked on and Jerry Ordway. Microface was a abandoned, I believe, Nader or Fiction House or one of those publishers from the Golden Age. And and I'm telling the audience this as much as I'm sure you already know this, but NPR they have a show, a financial show, and they decided because of the superhero craze, what are the mechanics of creating a comic book superhero, and it was suggested, well, you ought to grab one of the old public domain ones, and yet they took Microface, this throwaway backup feature,
Yeah.
and they're doing new content with it, and also tracking the business side of it on their Planet Money show. It's Marketplace Planet Money,
Right.
their special show. And it's funny
Right.
as hell. And yeah, I check in with Alex and Jamal about it to know what's going on. But no, it's fascinating.
I just did like 3 panels with Jamal last weekend. I did 7 panels in 2
Wow.
days. Just to prove that when I turned 72 in August,
Okay.
I could still do something. 7 panels in 2 days. I couldn't move after that, but 7 panels in 2 days. And Jamal is great to do a panel with, or to have dinner with, which I highly recommend. Which I also so a great guy. Molly Danger, come on, it doesn't get better than that.
Molly Danger's fantastic. Absolutely, man. And also all the work he's doing at Ahoy as well lately.
I'm a huge Ahoy fan.
Me too, man.
This is just at a time when I thought like brand loyalty was holding us all back. This time has been going on for about 40 years, but I thought the brand loyalty was, and now all of a sudden I find myself, oh, that's a new Ahoy title, I'll check out. They publish some of the best stuff on Earth right now.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. No,
just,
and
I'm jealous.
I can appreciate that. You've got a couple projects coming up that you're putting together?
Maybe. I mean, it appears, I want to work with my old friends, and some of them, are a little creaky. But it would be nice to do a couple of sort of last stands. Well, there's still paper to print them on, although I'm not a paper elitist. I read all my comics on my iPad.
I'm looking at my iPad right now. I completely understand.
It's and it's not just because I can blow up the panels. it's
we both have our glasses on. Absolutely.
That's right. I can sit in a hotel room in a convention at 2 a.m. and do anything I want within some reason. I can read anything I want, or watch, or listen to anything I want.
Sure.
My iPad will go to the crematorium with me.
Well, I was worried when comics first went digital, and I'm holding my iPhone up because I was worried about this, and it's like, I don't know if I want to read comics, and the panel size is always going to be baseball card size, and I'm like, what's going to happen to the double page spread and beautiful art? And then the iPad came out, and it's like, okay, everything's going to be all right, and it's like it's pretty, and the colors are beautiful, so and again, the portability, I understand.
Yeah, no, I think it's just terrific. Also, if for whatever reason I actually have to move my comics collection again, which I haven't done in 35 years and has gotten larger in those 35 years, and hopefully will be sold off while I'm out of the doctor or something, I don't want to move that again. I'll move my iPad and a hard disk, and I've got like 28 terabytes worth of hard disk space. I can download my brain into my hard disk. So.
You're gonna be like God, I can't remember now. Toby Jones in The Winter Soldier, Captain America.
Oh yeah.
When he's Zola.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's my.
I look forward to our podcast interviews when you're the Ghost of the Machine, Mike. That's going to be great. So
I will be untethered. I will find a way to be untethered.
have you seen that sitcom that's on Amazon called Upload? And
No,
essentially, it's about a guy. It's like 10 minutes into the future, that kind of idea. But a guy
right.
he's in a car accident in a self-driving car, and his girlfriend is rich, and instead basically it's a digital afterlife. His conscience is loaded to
Oh,
a cloud, and it's hilarious. It's a great idea, and it's on Amazon Prime. They've got 2 seasons of it. It's a very clever comedy.
I should check it out. It's I'm used to like growing up and knowing every TV show that's on. Well, that's impossible now.
Of
And
course,
also, there's more streaming stuff on now that I want to see than I'll ever have time or attention span to see. And that is such a different world. It wasn't that long ago when Bruce Springsteen recorded 99 channels and nothing's on.
that's right.
And it's also not true anymore.
No, it's not.
And I'm waiting for the Bruce Springsteen channel, which undoubtedly will happen.
I'm sure XM Sirius hasn't planned. I have no doubt that it'll be on satellite radio if it isn't already.
I'm fine with that. Stephen Van Zandt has kept radio alive in my house, as have others over at Sirius. But for guys like me, who started out in radio before I was in comics, it was. It's a weird form of nostalgia. I mean, I miss, local news, even though nothing happens in Norwalk, Connecticut. But I miss local news. I miss the concept. I miss turning on the radio and hearing local weather. But radio, I'm still listening to Jack Benny reruns. So.
Me too. Don't worry about it, Mike. It's all right.
I'm it.
And it's funny. I was going to ask you, did you? And again, it just debuted this weekend. But the George Carlin documentary on
Haven't
HBO.
not seen it yet. I am planning on seeing it probably in the next couple of days. Very much looking forward to it. Here's a little piece of trivia, and I will say this is one Chicago into another. But I think the rest of you out on Earth will enjoy this. When Lenny Bruce was first arrested for obscenity, which really meant he was talking about the church, obscenity, blasphemy, pretty close. He wasn't arrested alone. There was a 14-year-old who was arrested with him because he wouldn't shut up about, like, why are you arresting this guy? That 14-year-old who crashed, I think it was Mr. Kelly's, the nightclub, was George Carlin. So the first time George Carlin got arrested for obscenity was the first time Lenny Bruce got arrested for obscenity. And that, to me, is a milestone. That's it. That's Earth 1 and Earth 2 colliding. That's it. Crisis on Infinite Comics. It was great.
Absolutely, man. No, I knew that straight. In fact, years ago, about 5 years ago, when they released the last Carlin DVD set that had his final couple HBO specials, Kelly Carlin, his daughter, was making the rounds and doing publicity for it. And I got the opportunity to talk to Kelly. She's very prominently, obviously, in the documentary because she lived it all. And she it was what an amazing career. You know it very well. I know it very well. We grew up on comedy albums and the like. And it's a great story. I've only seen the first half. They ran the second half last night, but I republished my Kelly interview on Word Balloon actually today.
I'll have to check that out.
Oh, absolutely, man.
I will definitely check that out.
Well, he was amazing.
Lenny, so much of Lenny's stuff is so appropriate today. Most of it. There are lessons we still need to learn. And George picked up on all of that stuff and took it so much further because he had more time to take it further, and he also had HBO where he was allowed to do that. Not going to get that stuff on Johnny, but HBO, sure. And this is a better world for it. Let me tell you the cool part about hanging out with Del Close, and there are plenty of cool parts. And I should plug the documentary that was done about Wasteland and Del Close for Mad Men only. Brilliant documentary.
Del Close, for people who don't know, one of the founders of Second City, the stage Second City in Chicago, and a comedy guru to so many, including John Ostrander from comics, but also, and yourself. And I mean, God, Wasteland. But no, please continue and talk about Del Close.
Del trained or directed and or performed on stage with every major American comedian from the mid-'50s until 2000s.
Yes.
Tina Fey, Stephen Colbert, Amy Poehler, all of those folks.
Bill Murray, Jon Favreau, Vince Vaughn, all trained by Del Close. Yes.
That's right. The list goes on and on and on and on. Both Belushi brothers.
Yes.
But being tight with Del, I heard so many of these great stories from Del, and I have no doubt that they're true because I believe in Martians. But I could walk up to any of those great classic comedians from the late 50s, early 60s, and I'm talking people like Shelley Berman and Erwin Corey. I missed out on Lord Buckley, unfortunately.
Oh, bummer.
And certainly Lenny Bruce. But I could walk up to any of them and just mention his name. And I had an entry to those people because not only was Del part of that scene, but he's the guy who created the successful comedy album beyond the stuff that Red Fox and Bill Barth were doing, and the X-rated stuff.
Sure.
Which was also hilarious, but I'm talking about the stuff that you could buy at Sears. Remember Sears?
I do.
And that was a hell of a privilege because Erwin Corey died at like 101 or something, 102.
Yep.
Brother Theodore, names that most people who are hearing this never heard of and should check out. And the world is at your fingertips. It's on YouTube and all. You can Google till the cows come home. Yep. But guys like Lord Buckley was so brilliant that he did a shot on Groucho Marx's quiz show on You Bet Your Life, and Marx broke character, something I'd never seen him do before in public, and explained who Lord Buckley was, and had Lord Buckley do the Naz, one of his most famous routines, on camera.
You Bet Your Life, yeah.
On You Bet Your Life. The show was actually taped or recorded for like an hour. It's 45 minutes an hour, and they cut it down to a half hour.
Yes.
So they cut most everything else out and just had Lord Buckley. And that's available on YouTube if you scrounge around, and it's brilliant. And to show Groucho, to see Groucho being so differential to a man is the greatest testimony I can think of for a comedian. Just that simple.
That's fantastic. I didn't know about this, and I promise you, I'll be looking it up when we're done here. Somebody asked, Peter Rowe asked here, what artwork you have on the wall. So I'm going to zoom in and let you tell everybody about. Behind.
See, that's a Ricochet page from the two-part Ricochet comic that Stan Line did. Julia Lacremont colored it beautifully, magnificently. Mike Vosberg's Blackhawk is above that, and there's 3 panels from a Reed Crandall Blackhawk story from the 40s.
Wow.
It's next to Shea Anton Penza's The Butcher, the series that DC will never admit to having published. Because it was called The Butcher. Yeah. Did you watch Peacemaker, guys? Anyway. One of my favorite TV shows ever. I think that's the only art that's in the shop. That Blackhawk is the first issue of the Blackhawk comic book,
Wow.
solo comic. So that's my Blackhawk tribute wall. My late wife Linda gave me that comic book as a present, and
Wow.
God damn, that's great.
You're damn
God
right. It's great. That's all right. You could swear. Absolutely, man. No, that's fantastic. Jesus. Amazing stuff, man. Well, again, this is Mike. This is why we're friends. This is why I love talking to you. And
damn.
and hanging out and talking about Chicago radio, talking comedy, and of course comic books as well. So how can people reach you online as we're wrapping up here?
Go to popculturesquad.com, and if you really want to send me a note, uh, I can't guarantee I'll write back because I'm slow and tired, and I sleep. And now that weed is legal, sometimes I don't get around to a few things, but it's wonderful for pain management. Mike.gold@mac.com. Or see me at a convention. I'm usually very polite.
Usually.
Usually, and well, shit happens. But but I really am still in awe of anybody who comes up and says, "I read your stuff." If you come up to me and say, "Oh, my grandfather used to love your work," uh, I might be taken aback a little bit. That happened to me in Anchorage, at a store appearance in Anchorage. And I was still I was pushing 40 then. That was weird. That was great.
Jesus. Too funny, man. No, hey, thank you for still being out there. We always love these stories. This is why I love having you on Word Balloon, and I'm sure we'll have more stories. And yeah, I'm when it gets a little better, like you said in August. God, I hope to see you.
Define better, but yes, I look forward to getting home. The 2 years that I couldn't were horrible to me.
Yeah.
If I don't recharge those batteries out in Chicago, I'm a sad human being, even though I can mail order my Italian beef.
This is true. This is very true.
It's not quite as good.
Well, I've sent Lou Malnati's pizzas to Portland as a thank you. So I know what you're talking about. Absolutely, man. Yeah. That's hilarious.
If you're independently wealthy, you can do that every day.
No, this is great, Mike. Thanks as always. Stick around.
John, I love doing these with you. It's wonderful.
It's always a pleasure, buddy. So hang on one second. We'll talk. But everybody, thank you very much for watching. Everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.